This week, we have Jordan Stampler as our guest on the Patrick Jones Baseball Podcast. Jordan is the Director of Player Development at Campbell University. Campbell is always, it seems, in the top 25 every year as one of the best college baseball programs in the country. Last season in 2023, they were top 15 in the country for a significant amount of the season. And so in this episode, Jordan takes you behind the scenes as to why Campbell is able to have success year after year, even without this big Power Five brand behind them. And then he also shows why he's so highly regarded in the coaching industry. Jordan is, the way I kind of look at him, he's a Swiss Army knife. He does a little bit of everything really well, and I love listening to him talk about hitting and game planning, and I like hearing him talk about just other parts of the game as well. He's very knowledgeable, and I would say lastly, he works really hard. He works really hard to get better and to be able to help out the players more. So you're going to enjoy this one. Jordan Stampler, Director of Player Development at Campbell University. All right, we now welcome onto the podcast Jordan Stampler, Director of Player Development at Campbell. Jordan, thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate you having me, Patrick. I frequently listen to the podcast, and I'm excited. Was excited that you asked me to come on, and excited to break it down with you, man.
Yeah, this would be a lot of fun. I got some good stuff for you. I think one of the I think the things that you do really well is I think you're really well organized. I know you're on top of a lot of the technology stuff, but you have a good filter of what works, what doesn't work in a team setting. Like for coaches out there who are interested maybe in implementing technology within their program, like A, do you think they should? And B, like what are some of the things that you did to help systematize that in a team setting?
Yeah. So first off, I'll give you some background about myself that would help maybe some coaches who don't have the opportunity to um, have resources and things like that. I came from played in a junior college system where this is kind of like pre-tech stuff. Went to a Division 1 when that stuff started coming about. We didn't really have a lot of it at our fingertips. I've coached at the D3 level, the D2 level, and the D1 level. Really didn't have the opportunity to dive into a lot of technology, data, analytics, any of that stuff until I got to Campbell, which I'm now my fourth year at. So prior to that, my experience with it, TrackMan, Baseball Cloud, True Media, any of that stuff was very, very limited. And so having the opportunity to come over to Campbell and kind of grow and branch out in that regard, I think was huge for me. Since I've had the opportunity to work with it and seen players kind of be able to tick up at a quicker pace than you might normally see in some player development with the use of any number of different things, right? Whether it's looking at ball flight data or looking at pitch metrics or just like putting them in environments to succeed based on some of the stuff that you might know, I think is the advantage. I would tell coaches, like young coaches, old coaches, whoever. I know I think we're kind of out of those weeds now, PJ, right? Like where it's like the old versus new.
Yeah.
I think people by and large are starting to see the value in it in some regard, right? I'm not telling you that it's a full send on, all data driven stuff, but I'm also telling you that the people who once probably believed that there's no value in it are starting to kind of turn that page a little bit, right? Um, it's a measurement, and we've talked about this at a little more length, but they're all just measurements, and that's what I call metrics, or just measurements. And I think the game of baseball has never been afraid of measurements, right? Whether it's a 60 time or a pitching velocity. We throw the ball from 60 feet 6 inches, we run 90 feet. There's measurements all throughout really any sport, but in baseball for sure. Specifically to our sport, like we measure a lot of what we do. And I've used this analogy with you before. If all things were equal, player A throws 90 miles an hour, player B throws 80 miles an hour, and everything else is same, right? This is a complete hypothetical, but the breaking ball is the same, the height's the same, the projectability is the same, the arm action's the same, everything else is the exact same. Which one would you take? And, I would venture to say that 100% of baseball people are probably going to say the person who throws 90. Again, everything else are the same. I know that's a hypothetical, but that's the way I kind of started to look at data. They're just measurables, man, and I've never really been afraid of them. At times, I've certainly been overwhelmed because of how much can be poured on you at once and how much information can be thrown right into your face. But I've never really been afraid of it. I've always just tried to dive in and soak in what I can. Um, Learning some of that stuff, it's give and take with different players, different coaching staff members. There's certainly some give and take, and I think my job is to kind of be a guardrail in a sense for what our players want and don't want, what our coaches want and don't want, and trying to just align those two together to give us optimal success. I think whether that's in the team environment or the individual environment, I think giving guys options, giving them different ways to read things, giving them different ways to implement things, and then picking and choosing what works for them, I think has been a key to success. If you're focusing on ball flight stuff, they may not need to know their quote unquote launch angle every single swing. I it's worked for some guys. Other guys, we just give them an extrinsic goal of hit it over the L screen. Other guys, we tell them hit it off the center field wall. Different things work for different guys. So finding different options for guys to put them in a position to succeed and have that language be similar from, the coaching staff as a whole, I think is super important. So there's a million different things that we've done in terms of guy to guy or team environments. But I've never been afraid of measurements. I think they're super important to use in our game. And I think it's helped us kind of be able to develop guys at a more rapid rate than we once were able to.
Is there anything common that you hear from maybe the coaches at Campbell or the players of the things that they want versus don't want? I know you said like there's some stuff they want, some stuff they don't want. Is there anything that you hear on a frequent basis like, man, like nobody wants this XYZ?
Yeah, that's tough. I don't know that there's like one common thing. I would say that there is always a point of too much for almost every player. I think it's important to try. So I'll peel it back for you a little bit. Like what we try and do is basically we have our areas of like main emphasis on the hitting side of things. Um, we put our guys into basically four different buckets, right? And from there they each have like a primary what we call deficiency, secondary, tertiary deficiencies. And we try to evaluate what we think will be the most bang for our buck or the lowest hanging fruit within those deficiencies. And then we try to basically train them in environments and give them tools and implements that'll help train those deficiencies. And with that, so we use a lot of tech and data to figure out those deficiencies, right? And then we track it by continuing to use the tech and data. But with that, we will only give them really as much as they want, right? So as long as we're putting them in environments that are conducive for them to tick upward and we can measure it to see if they're ticking upward, then we know it's right. You know, there are certain guys who want to read every single swing on blast, that want to print out from baseball cloud after every time they hit on the field, and use the TrackMan. And there are other guys that don't want to see it at all and know, hey, that was a good day, a good beat of BP. I felt like I flushed every ball and I felt, my swing was good and, it felt better. Right. And so that's kind of the pick and choose. I think it's important for our coaches to just kind of understand all of the, not all of, but a majority of the data and what it means. And then so when, me or Coach Hare or Coach Wise or somebody is working in a cage with somebody on their attack angle, we're going to work with them specifically on this type of machine, and they might swing this type of bat because they're working on this type of path, if that makes sense. So there's some guys we definitely, and we don't, the whole thing of like tricking guys into it isn't really a thing. Like our goal, our job is to make players better, right? We want to make them better, to make our team better, to win games. That's no secret. So I think a lot of that has to do with the culture and the buy-in from the guys and just understanding that, hey, like we're going to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Some things that you're going to do might be a little bit different, but they're only going to be to benefit you. And trust me, man, like not everything we do the first time around is like gold, right? Like we try things with guys and like, man, I hate this drill, or like, dude, this feels terrible. So we just back off it and try to find a different way that feels better for them. But we're still working towards the same thing. And I think that's the collaborative piece that we try to bring, it's not just like, hey, it's my way or it's Coach Hare's way or it's Coach Wise's way. Like they have to be invested just as much in their own success for them to start to see those gains. And I think when we build it like that, it gives them an opportunity to buy in and be invested in what they're actually doing.
It's kind of have like a three-headed monster in a sense, attacking it with the players.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know, because I've heard these like war stories of pro ball guys that are like, "Hey, we're just going to make you do this," and they're like,
Mm.
I don't even know where to begin." So, my idea of player development, I think, is probably it's a little bit more molded, I would say, in just terms of us having a general plan, making sure it's kind of turnkey more or less for the player, and then we kind of give them options to sort of like a buffet or a menu that they can pick and choose from to say like, hey, you know what, this is the one I like. These are the two that I like, and I'm really going to stick to those. And we got to be cool with that, right? Because we're giving them those options, and now they can kind of start to build their plan with their own buy-in. Because just like anything, man, like if they're not invested in it, like how bought in are they really going to be when we're telling them to swing with a short bat on a hack, blowing them up at the bottom of the zone or whatever the case may be. They have to be as invested as us. Like we could have the best plan in the world, but if it ain't executed well, then we probably not going to get very far. It's the same thing with the lineup, right? Like we could draw it up and think like, man, this lineup's going to score 15 a game, but the guy's got to produce, right? And so it's the same in my mind. It's the same kind of system that we've used for some of the player development stuff.
I know you're always up to date and always looking on the internet, social media, and just always looking for new ways to help out the guys you're working with. Is there anything that you've started to do in the past, maybe this fall or even past, this past year, really, from a development standpoint that maybe in years prior you didn't do? I know, like for example, you had mentioned like the short bat there and that like, mixing that with like a hack attack or whatever. Is there anything that you've seen really help players that maybe like a high school coach or somebody else could kind of take and help out their guys?
Yeah. I think to answer that at our level, to answer directly at our level might be a little bit different
Mm.
than the high school level. We focus a lot on pitch shapes and velocity, right? At the high school level, like I don't know how much you would really want to entertain that, at least in a team environment. Maybe with some more advanced guys, maybe. I understand that at the high school level, like you're usually coaching the players that are in your school. At our level, we're recruiting the players that we like and have tools and assets that we like, and then we could build off of. Not to say you can't build off players' potential in high school, but we focus a lot on pitch shapes, and because we're facing a lot of guys who can do some different things with the ball at our level, and I would imagine that's even um, more so at the pro level. So something we got on recently, and I wouldn't say not to do this. I just think it might be more sparingly at the high school level, I would say. We've got the smash balls from Driveline that create different like shapes and flights. And we feed those in the hack attack, like honestly, I would say every day. And then we also got this summer, we bought some of they're called like heater pro balls, I believe is what they're called. Pretty similar ball to the smash ball. I feel like they might be a little bit truer. They carry a little more consistently. And I think the brakes on them might be a little bit more severe when we start to set up like breaking balls and sliders and things like that. So just seeing like, bigger, sharper pitch shapes, those balls have really helped us. And what we've started to do, as our guys start to get a feel for what these balls can do, and how they have to start attacking them, is start to give our guys different tools and implements, and pair those two up. So, for example, if guys struggle at the bottom of the zone, or I should say, if guys struggle to kind of climb their swing, they struggle with like attacking the ball uphill. We would more frequently want to shoot them something like down angled, so a breaking ball or even a fastball machine that's like moving downhill, and probably give them like a short bat, to make them feel they have to move in this position with their body or their posture to be able to get under that plane to match the plane of that pitch. We've done stuff like that, as far as contact quality stuff with with those light flight type balls, or even like PVC or those thunder stick bats, something with just a finer tuned barrel, so they have to be more consistently on the barrel. So again, like if we can classify our guys and we could say like, hey, this guy really struggles with contact quality or he needs more bat speed. We try to recruit guys with bat speed, but by and large, like there's never really a point of bat speed where like, whoa, that's too much bat speed. So that usually is like the first go after for us. Like, hey, does he have enough bat speed? From there, we look at contact quality, swing direction, attack angle, a bunch of different things, and then we just try to bucket them, usually like 4 or 5 different groups, something like that, and then we start to play with those balls and flight of those balls and the different implements and tools that we give them, in order to quote unquote clean their swing up, right? So that's I would say investing in some of those. I think we bought 5 dozen of those heater pro balls. They lasted us all fall. I don't think we had one break. We could shoot them out of a mini or a big hack. I would not recommend throwing them, because I think it could, for you to try to create some of the speed and change the direction that a machine would probably do some damage to your arm, I would imagine. But yeah, we feed them out of the hacks all the time.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure some guys will definitely check that out. You'd mentioned, a big emphasis more than a lot of maybe like mechanical stuff and things like that for high school coaches. But what you guys more so focus on is pitch shapes. And I don't know if you listened to when we had, Michael Kadire on, but it's pretty interesting because he had said that he never wanted to look for a shape. Like he wanted just was looking for speeds, not shapes. He felt like it would mess him up because if he got the pitch, then it would freeze him if he was looking for the shape versus just reacting. And so I guess I'm curious as to how you go about implementing like that like philosophy to your players, like in terms of the shapes, game planning, all that stuff. I know it's complicated, and I know it is a little bit individualized, obviously, but I'm just curious as to hear like what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah. So when I say shapes, I mean like ride fastballs, sinkers, uh, downer breaking balls, and then more of like a sweeper breaking ball. So those are like, the 4 main shapes that I say. And then obviously we can expand on that however much we get. And I wouldn't say like in game, we don't. In fact, we don't say like we're sitting on this shape. We usually have, an early or fastball rhythm and then like a late rhythm. So to Kadire's point, it is probably the same, but understanding. So for us, to kind of go into that question a little bit, understanding where these pitches have to start for them to be good for us to hit. That's the piece that's usually different for almost every guy. Guys who struggle at the top probably need to see the pitch down a little bit more. Guys who struggle at the bottom need to see the pitch up a little bit more. And for us, like there's value in it with understanding maybe the lineup construction that day, or who's our first option off the bench that day, or who might be a good guy to slide up or down in the lineup based on the starter that we're seeing. And when we talk about shapes, like we usually pair those with metrics, and I talked a little bit about this at CTD this year. How our guys have now start to understand like, hey, this is 20 inches a ride. Because 20 inches a ride feels different to probably every single guy in your lineup. It might feel like, this is impossible to cover for one guy, and the next guy might feel like, dude, that's a cookie, right? So every guy that's kind of different. And if I could just say like, yo, PJ, this guy, it feels like 20 inches a ride to me, then now the guy on deck can say like, dude, okay, 20 inches, like I got that in the bag, or like I really need to make an adjustment to cover that. But anything else the same, like it feels like it's, that's a little cutter. It feels like it's moving away from me probably -1 or -4 or -6. Like our guys have started to be able to see those numbers on our video board in training every day, and then pair them with the live stuff when they see it in real time when we don't have the metrics, and they could say it feels like blank ride, blank run, blank sweep, whatever the case may be. So yeah, I would say like training shapes just to understand what it is and then where it has to start. So when we go into a game or a series or whatever, and we're saying like, hey, this guy's a sinker guy, This guy's a ride guy, whatever. And we could give them a metrics based on some of the data that we've pulled during the scouting report stuff. So like, hey, he's gonna ride it up to 24 inches, but he carries it on average at about 19. So you're gonna say, okay, like I'm probably gonna try to cover about 22, 23, and then each guy has an idea of what that feels like to take into gameplay with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I love that because really, especially just because of vision, right? And how everyone interprets that differently.
Yep.
In terms, if I just went back and said like, "Hey, this guy's got a lot of ride," well, to me that may be different, as you said, to maybe from me to you. But if I say it's 20 inches, well, I mean that's objective information, and so we do perceive that differently, but I know how that is going to relate to me specifically. So I like
Yeah.
that common language.
And it's, in gameplay, it's super difficult to know exactly what it is. You get
Sure.
a report after the game and you see it and you're like, yeah, we were right. But with how advanced some of the scouting information is, like we can go on True Media and see how a guy's riding it or how he's sinking it or how much depth or sweep his breaking ball is going to have. And then try and put our guys in the best position to be able to handle those effectively.
So one of the things that I'll do from time to time is I'll go to a different colleges and just kind of just go and just hang out and watch practice, and you get a good vibe, you get an energy of what it's like on a typical practice day in the fall. And it's different for a lot of different programs, and there's no necessarily right or wrong way. Um, what would you say like the type of energy, or what would you say like if it's like a typical day in the fall? Like if someone were to come watch, is it pretty laid back? Is it pretty intense? Like what's a typical fall day like from an energy standpoint at Campbell?
Yeah. PJ, man, in our program, like if you're juiceless, you're useless, man. If you don't have guys that are, and I mean that, like we don't have a bunch of like hoorah guys and just like yelling at the top of their lungs, but like our players come to Campbell because they want to win baseball games, and I think they've proven that the last few years, and majority of Coach Hare's time here. Um, it's a really fun place to play, and I think it's because our staff kind of shows up with the same consistent energy every day, but our players bring it, man. And so if you were to show up to practice, it's dudes flying around. It's usually a pretty structured schedule, and we're usually on time. But there's dudes like flying around all practice 2-3 hours, whatever the case may be. Inter squads there's usually some crap talking coming out of both dugouts, and it's pretty fun. But I think that only helps them when we get into tougher environments, into the spring and stuff. So I would say it's just a bunch of guys who are they're gonna go out there, they're gonna compete, they're gonna play hard, they're gonna fly around, and when it's time to scrimmage or compete in really any environment, there's gonna be some crap talk and some trash talk and to try to pull the best out of guys. And honestly, what you see with that is some dudes sink and some dudes swim, right? And I think that helps us as much as any part of our training or anything. Get the best guys to the front, whether that's the rotation or the lineup or on the field or whatever the case may be. Because you see that, what is it like? People say it's 15% better or 15% worse with some pressure or something like that. So I think you see some of that when there is just constant will to be great within our program, whether that's BP taking ground balls on the clock, anything. I think we're always trying to compete, and I think driving that competitive nature home promotes like really good energy at practice and helps us evaluate guys like how they handle some of the pressure.
If you're juiceless, you're useless. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that. I'm gonna steal that. I like that. I
I
know
stole
like,
it from somebody else,
oh,
so
did you? Well, that's all
I
right.
don't know who,
I'll
but
give
yeah.
you the credit. I'll give you the credit. Um, I know, you said a couple times that you're recruiting like certain types of players, and you had mentioned bat speed, you mentioned some other stuff, but I was just kind of want to go deeper as to like who you're looking for when you're out recruiting, because I feel like the best coaches, like they know exactly the type of player, maybe even body type, or that they're looking for. Because they're a pretty elaborate system you have, or not even necessarily written down, but just types of players that you're out looking for. Because the reason why I say this too is because I mean I know you guys, last year one of the geez, top 15 programs pretty much the entire season in the nation, and it's not like if I went to somebody down the street, where's Campbell at? They would have no idea. But yet every year you guys are one of the best programs in the country. So I'm just curious as to how you go about doing that in terms of on the recruiting side.
Yeah, that's funny that question was actually on Jeopardy the other day. I don't know if you saw that clip anywhere on
I
so
did. I Googled, to get ready for this podcast, I Googled Campbell University before I typed in baseball. And the first thing on Google is someone else asked the question, where is Campbell University?
yeah, it was on Jeopardy and none of the contestants got it right. But that's part of our MO, man. At least in our program is nobody's from nowhere and we've kind of our guys have kind of latched onto that. They probably have been under recruited or something like that, and we see something in them that we could pull the best out of them, and then they come to Buies Creek to develop without distraction. It ain't big city bright lights, and again, like we want guys who want to be good at baseball, want to get a world class education, want to compete for and win championships, and I think they see that when they come on a visit to Buies Creek, and there ain't a whole lot of nightlife or anything like that. It's you can truly come to our place and really focus on seeing how good of a ball player you can be. We try to find athletes, man. To answer your question, like I think the better athlete that we could find, the more projection there is, and the better we could kind of help mold that guy's career. But it depends on needs more than anything. There's not some we're not doing anything, I would say, like drastically different than much other programs. Like if we lose some bangers, we're probably going to go try to find guys who have a little bit more juice. If we lose dudes who could really run, we're probably going to go find guys who could run a little bit better. In a perfect world, they're all, Sed Mullins and Zach Netto's of the world, right? They have the juice to hit, 10 home runs and they have the ability to steal 20 bags. So, in a perfect world, like that's kind of what we're after. We call them ballers, like guys who can drive the ball in the gaps, over outfielders' heads and over the fence, and then guys who also have the opportunity to steal bases. Because we feel like in our system, we definitely help amplify all that, but it's a complete offensive package. It's not pressure just as far as guys standing in the box. We pressure on the base pass until we score through the plate. So we want to find guys who are, as tooled out and as athletic as possible. And then when we get those types of players, we feel like we have a really good chance to kind of mold them into the premier players that we have in the country, type of thing.
My next question is a little bit different, going a little bit different direction, similar but different direction. You've been a head coach now. You've been a head coach. You've been, an assistant coach. You're now, director of player development. You've had a lot of different roles in college baseball at different levels. And I'm curious as to like if today, knowing everything know now and learned under Coach Hare and everybody else, if you were to become let's just say hypothetically a head coach somewhere, what's the very first thing you do?
Probably try not to get fired in the opening presser. That would be number one. No, I think the first thing, it has to start from within. I think you have to, part of the reason, and Coach Hare talks about this all the time, but part of the reason that we've had some success here is because we've had really good people in our program. And I think it starts with the people in your program to build it the right way. People who are loyal, people who are hardworking, and people who just want to be great, I think is really the answer. And I don't mean that just as far as like our coaching staff. This year we have 3 student managers. We have an academic coordinator. We have a full-time athletic trainer. We have a full-time strength conditioning guy. A few dudes who work with me on the player development side, and a full coaching staff. And it's really all of them, as I would say is the answer. And we've had, as far as I've been here working with guys who I'm sure people who listen to your podcast have heard of, but Tyler Shoemaker, who's moved on to Vanderbilt, and Tyler Robinson, who's at Liberty, and Joey Holcomb, who's at South Carolina. Alec Olson, who's now in a paid position out of Cal Baptist, and Adam Wise, who's back with us, but was a recruiting guy at Lipscomb. So we've just had, we've had a lot of opportunity for these guys to move on and whatnot. And I think, those guys being part of our culture and here with me have helped me learn and grow so much. But every single one of them has these traits that are just like, they're so easy to identify. They're all super loyal people. They're going to tell you how it is. They're going to be honest with you. They're going to be upfront with you. They're super hardworking. Like there ain't many days, PJ, where you show up to our office and there's just like one guy there. It's there's going to be like six, seven, eight, nine guys there all the time, ready to work, whether that's hitting in the cage or break down a scouting report on our next opponent. And I mean they're like 8:30 in the morning till 7 p.m. So our guys are they're going to be sought after and taken care of by our coaches, or our managers or our extended staff in any way, shape, or form. And I think when you have that setup and structure, it allows the players, in the clubhouse and stuff to see how much it means to you guys, and so they want to do everything they can and pour it in each and every day, and then be there for each other. And I think that's probably where it starts. So if I was to be in that position, I would try to hire the best possible assistants that I can, to basically run the day to day and things like that. Because I think without assistants and good support staff, like there's so many more pieces that go into it than just the head coach, and I think everybody understands that. So yeah, that's probably where I would start with it, I would say.
You mentioned loyal a few times there. When you say loyal, how does that mean to you? Like just not leaving at the first chance? Like how do you go about describing what loyal means?
Yeah, it's everything. I think being open and honest, like because um there's obviously other programs in the country that can pay, whether it's player development staff or assistant coaches, they could pay them more, and there's going to be more lucrative options for them year to year. And when you have success, those guys are sought after, for sure. And I think it's not just that; it's just the day to day of them, showing up, and you go see a guy on the road that we're going to try to bring on campus, and this is the whole write up about him, and maybe you're not telling some of that stuff to your buddies or something like that,
Mm.
that you're gonna pour it in for your guys, and that's going to be your first and primary focus. I think there's so many different uses to that word, but all in all, it's just like you're here, you're present, you're with Campbell now, and you're going to do everything you can to help them. Obviously, all of our futures are kind of unwritten, and we can take it, any which way we want to. There's guys who are in baseball who get out of it. There's guys who move in, who move to different directions, different levels, and things like that. And so I don't mean loyalty just in terms of like, well, I'm here with you now, so I'm gonna work for you or something like that. And then they're looking to jump ship. I think that's definitely a piece of it. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole package really is just guys who say they want to be here are truly invested when they're here, in every facet of what we're trying to do.
What's the best part about Campbell, like the area around it?
Um, that there's not a ton of like distractions. I think, I've kind of alluded to that. Like there's enough to do. It's not, like I said, like crazy nightlife, but there's a couple sports bars and restaurants. There's a bowling alley. There's a drive shack just down the road, like a Top Golf type of thing. And there's some other things, in the area that are cool. There's some state parks and things like that. But it's definitely country, man. It's definitely a little more remote. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, man, and I grew up in a city. I don't even know how many people live there now, but 10 million people, let's say, in the Broward County area. And it's just a completely different lifestyle. And getting from I live 3 miles from campus, and it takes me 8 minutes to get into work or whatever, where that same 3 miles in Fort Lauderdale might take 20 minutes. I think the relaxed pace of just being able to know, like, hey, I'm going to leave now and get there now. And, if I want to go shop at the Walmart down the road, it's going to take me 10 minutes, and it's not going to be completely packed, and so on and so forth. Like I've enjoyed that lifestyle and change in my life. I think, again, it's part of the reason our guys think this is a kind of a second home to them. It's definitely a different style, but it draws them in. And I think what draws them in initially is definitely the baseball culture and the guys in the clubhouse and the coaches that we have here. But then outside of that, I think they learn to love it, man, and they learn to love to be with each other and hang out with each other, off the field, whether that's at bonfires at one of their houses or, just around campus or at the facility.
What are some of the things that you see on the recruiting side, like maybe some mistakes that you see like the players make, or maybe even just coaches make too? I mean, travel coaches or whoever. Like, is there anything that any advice you could give to those out there listening that you think would benefit them based on your experience on the recruiting side?
Yeah, yeah. With players, I think it's super important, when a coach is showing you whether it's a little love or all the love in the world, right? Just be as open and communicative with them as possible, right? Like they can't possibly know your schedule as well as as well as know your own schedule. If a game gets canceled because of rain or hell the other team didn't show up or something like that, just communicate that with them and let them know. I think that's super important and can go a long way. Um, we've had multiple instances where we expected to see a guy play and then we couldn't because of rain, and then there's just no communication. Not that it's the recruit's fault or whatever, just there's changes in the schedule that we would like to know as quickly as we can. And a lot of times those players have information prior to the website updating or whatever, and we would obviously like to see those guys play. So just being able to communicate with that with the coach as quickly as possible, so we can continue to set our schedule for whatever event or thing we're at. I think that's important. One of my pet peeves, man, as a travel ball coaches, is when you show up to a field and it's two things, right? The number one thing is they give you like, hey, who's the best player you guys got? You got a down game or whatever. You're not really following a guy. Who's your guys? You kind of give them that question, and they run down like 8 dudes on the roster. And there's a few travel teams out there that they got littered talent throughout the throughout the roster, but by and large, like you know that's probably not the case. And most of the time, like we're going to be on one or two guys from a team, and it just goes back to honesty, man. Like I think if the travel coaches or high school coaches are just open and honest with you, the reciprocating question should usually be something like, well, what are you guys looking for? And then if I said, well, we're looking for guys who we think can play the left side of the infield, then now they could start to refine that answer. But if they come out of the gun blazing with like, oh, we got the center fielder and the left fielder and the guy hitting 3-hole, and you should check out our catcher too, then I think that just loses a little bit of credibility with me, like off the bat. And it's going to be hard. Like if I do have a down slot to watch a game or something, it's probably going to turn me away more times than it's going to draw me in, because I know the likelihood of that now holding any weight is slimmer. We're typically looking for the best player or players on the field, and the likelihood that they have 7 of them is not extremely high. On the other side of that, if I introduce myself to a coach or whatever that we don't have a relationship, and he's like, hey, where are you at? And I say Campbell. They'll usually follow up with like, is that D1, which is fine. Like that's cool. But then if they think they have a player that's too good, they'll say like, oh, well, this guy's too good for you, and I, cause we've gotten that a few times, and I'm like, got it. Okay. Great. Now we lose credibility the other way. And then you find out that the guy goes somewhere, that might be in our league or like a very similar comp or something. Because we get in recruiting battles all the time with the, Power 5 schools and things like that. And I think a lot of guys don't really understand that, the scope of it, right? It's like you said, like we were top 15 nationally for majority of the year. We've been in the top 25 the last few years, pretty regularly. And like it starts to warrant some of that credit of like, man, these are players that we need to be on and need to recruit. Not to say that we're going to get any or all of them, right, or all or any of them, but to be in the mix in the conversation, I do think is warranted at this point with where we're at and the trajectory that we're on, to continue to try and go after the better players, in the country. So it definitely works on both sides. I would say those are probably my 2 pet peeves, but it definitely, both ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, I would say you're definitely one of the few coaches that I've talked to, because I know when we were in Florida together, like you said, like you love recruiting. You know what I mean? You love the going out there and like trying to get a kid and get him on campus, and that kind of took me back a little bit because I don't hear that type of excitement and energy from a lot of coaches when it comes to recruiting. I think a lot of times it's just like, oh man, like they just don't want to do it. So I think it's awesome that you have that mindset that you love doing it, and that's passionate, for you. But with everything about the changes that have going on right now in the NCAA with the transfer portal and guys coming and going and junior college, would you say that the guy who would have been a Division I player, like let's just say mid-major D1 player 5, 7 years ago, and is that fringe guy should probably go to a JUCO now? Like, how would you advise? I know it's almost impossible to do to make one side of it like argument just because you don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. It's not like we're talking about a specific player, but I'm just kind of curious as to what your thoughts are on all of that because you're way more closer to it than I am.
Yeah, I don't, it's so individualized, right? And I think maybe more now than ever, I think what we need to press upon, high school kids is the right fit. Um, Not the first offer, maybe not the best money offer, just the best fit overall, I think is what's most important, right? Like having an understanding probably first geographically, is this a place that sorry, someone just popped up on my computer. What's going on here? Sorry about that.
You're good.
I think first, probably geographically, like, is this a place that I could see myself going to go to school? And then aligning that with the school, right? Is this a place that I could, take classes at? Is this a place that has my major? Is this a place that I can get into and can graduate from? And is this a place that I want a degree from? Um, I and then you can kind of go off into, the million different branches that is the baseball world, right? Like, is this the right culture for me? Is this the right fit for me? From a player standpoint, from a development standpoint, what are the things that you value as a player? Is this program going to help me? Is this program going to help me benefit from all those things, right? And chances are you're probably not going to check every single box, but to actually have, boxes to check, I think is important. And then when you find the right fit, and there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of them, but it's probably not going to be 130 of them. And I think that's kind of, going back to my high school time, I was just like, man, I just want an offer. And like, man, there's plenty of places in the country that I think I would have traveled to, but there's plenty of places that I don't think I would have traveled to. And I don't know that I understood all that in its entirety the way I do now. Um, so yeah, I think just finding the right fit. Is it a place that, do I want to get on the field first? Is this a Division I school that I probably don't have a chance to play early on? Looking at some of their track record, do they carry 60 or 70 guys in the fall? Is it going to be, a real chance for me to get on the field and show them what I can do in the fall, or are they just recruiting me to potentially cut me at the end of the fall? Because those things happen. I think there's no hidden secrets with that kind of stuff this day and age. It's all on the internet, and you can go read almost any forum to figure out any of that stuff. And I again, just finding the right fit, from the geographical area to the program to the school to the coaching staff to the other guys to the types of kids that they have, and try and check off as many boxes as you could. And if that's at a junior college, if that's at a D3, if that's at a D2, if that's at the college down the road or 3,000 miles away across the country, I think that's really the best way to go about it. I don't think anybody goes into college still to this day. I don't want to say anybody, but I think very few kids go into college thinking like, you know what, I'm going to go here for a year and then transfer. Like that usually is not the kid's mindset, right? Like they're being recruited again, whether it's by a junior college, an NAI school, a D1 school, like they're being recruited and they're feeling loved. And there's a period of time where they're like more or less infatuated with that school and that program. And so to think that they go into that with the mindset of saying like, yep, I'm just going to go here for a year or a semester or, a year and a half and then bang it and go somewhere else. Like, I don't think that's the case by and large still. Even with transfer portal and NIL and all that stuff, I think kids, they make a commitment to go to a school because that's where they want to go, and I think that a lot of that can or has the opportunity to get distorted, I think, throughout their time in college and everything on the internet and whatnot. But I think kids want to go where they want to go, and they've made a decision to go to that school. And then, I get that coaching changes can happen, and I get that NIL money can get involved, and there's a million different things. But I think finding the right fit initially can really help limit some of that stuff. It certainly won't eliminate it, but it could help limit it. And I think guys will have a better understanding for like, yep, this is the right fit for me. This is the place where I can go to for 2 years or 4 years and graduate from and or move on from. Because those opportunities, with the transfer portal and, going in and redshirting for a year, playing your 3, and then being a grad transfer somewhere with the transfer portal is like an unbelievable option for some
Right.
kids. And I think, we can get off in the weeds on that, but that's part of the benefit that is the transfer portal, gives guys those opportunities who did develop for a year and now they start to get their footing underneath them as a sophomore or junior, and they have another place to play with another year of eligibility. That could be part of the beauty of our game, right? Um, because I still think there are freshmen that can come in and compete for jobs. There are junior college guys at the Division I level. They can come in and compete for jobs immediately. There are certainly junior college guys that we want to come on board and be ready to play day one type of thing. And then there are other guys that we know might take a year or two. But having them understand that on the front end, I think is a big deal. And the guys probably having to understand that as well, I think is imperative to their
Yeah,
futures and
you
success.
bring up a ton of good points there. The only thing I just think I just would want to add is just as you said, you kind of got to know, what's your ultimate goal in a sense. Like if it's to play in professional baseball, which you guys have sent players to the, get drafted and play in the major leagues and things like that. I mean, it's definitely you want to have a track record, right? And so if you go somewhere and you don't get to play for a couple years, and then you put all this pressure on yourself to play really good as a junior just 1 year, that's a lot different than having 2, 3 years of at bats and playing time to be able to showcase to two teams that like, man, like this that wasn't a fluke. Like this guy really knows how to hit, he knows how to play. And so I just think that to your point as before, you got to kind of eventually at some point figure out what's my goal? Like what do I want to do here? Do I just want to play at the highest level of college baseball, or am I trying to get to the major leagues? And so I think only the player can answer that question, but I think that's the only thing that I would add to everything you said. I think
Yeah,
everything else is spot
great
on.
point. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, there's a million different things, and maybe that's something you can work on is coming up with a preliminary checklist for high school athletes
Mhm.
and how they could start to devise a plan of how to attack their recruiting.
It's a great
Um,
idea.
yeah.
I like that. Anything else you'd want to add? Anything else you want to add to the listeners about Campbell, about yourself, about anything? The floor is yours.
About Campbell, man, I love working here. I love what I do each and every day. Coaching college baseball and working with the athletes that we have. I think it's a tremendous place to work. I think it's a tremendous place to play. This is not a sales pitch. If you have an opportunity to come out and watch the Camels, whether it's at home or on the road, it's a fun brand of baseball, man. It is. It's probably a little bit different than a lot of things that you guys have seen regularly. I would say it's not just stock baseball. There's a lot of passion and energy similar to our practices. And I think that's kind of the chip on most of our guys' shoulders. So it's a fun brand, a fun culture to be a part of. I think it's as exciting a time as ever to be a part of our program. We're super excited for the 24 season coming up on us here quickly, and can't wait to get it rolling. So if you got a chance to come see us play or come check out Jim Perry Stadium and the Camels in 2024, it should be a fun year for us. So
Awesome, Jordan. As always, appreciate talking with you, and look forward to following you guys this year.
thank you for doing what you do, PJ. Thanks for having me on.